What's going on, beautiful people? We are back for the final week in our month long edition of Wonder Woman of the Week. I've been celebrating women all week, giving them their flowers, highlighting them and what they're doing. And it's been a great month with all the guests. We've highlighted the interviews, the stories, whatnot. Make sure you go check those out. Keep our link tree with all the links to, the YouTube, the audio, everything that you need to check out the Women's History Month Wonder Woman of the Week series. But I have a special guest here for this week, and she's the closer. She's wrapping up and putting a bow on everything that we've had going on this month, and I'm very excited that she gave me a little bit of her time on this evening, and I can't wait to jump into a lot of great conversation with her. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Miss Katani Sumner. How are you?
Hello, I'm well. I'm well. Good to see you.
Good to see you always.
Great to
Um,
be here.
Thank you for joining me um, doing this Wonder Woman of the Week series. And yeah, like I was saying, you are the closer. You're wrapping up things for me as the month winds down. And I'm excited to have you on here. And I'm excited to get in some great conversation with you for sure. So thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure. Happy to be here.
So, yeah, you and I go way back.
Way back.
Way back. You know me as I had to been 4 or 5 years old.
Whenever
Uh,
you were in kindergarten.
Whenever, yeah. So yeah, 5 years old. And you were my teacher, you were my counselor, I think it was some kind of after school program that took place for
hmm
Medco students.
hmm
We'd be at school, we'd hop on a bus, we'd come over to Mrs. Sumner's class, and we'd hang out with you for the afternoon until it was time to hop on the other bus to take us back home, all the way back to Boston. But that was our introduction. And it's crazy for me to say, well, not too crazy, but if I fast forward all these years to today, where I'm now deep in the world of education myself, I always sometimes think, well, how did I get here? And I mean, that story can go left and right and whatnot, but I know while I am here, one of my many inspirations of what I do and how I do it comes from you.
I appreciate that. That's
And
really nice.
even though it was many years ago at 5 years old, kindergarten, obviously the connection we had then through the years, even fast forward to today, where even recently I was able to come hang out with you a little bit at your job and see,
hmm
how you're still doing the things you do.
hmm
I was able to watch you and see, and like, wow, like I take a lot away from you in the way I interact with my students today.
hmm
So I know I just want to ask you an initial question, and this is just, to start things off.
hmm
Being in education for so many years, what do you think is different today from when it was back then in terms of when you had me as a student? What do you think has changed in the world of education, or how us educators interact with students years ago compared to today?
Well, thank you for that lofty question. But I have to say, in some ways, unfortunately, the more things change, the more they stay the same, in that I didn't intend to become an educator. I always wanted to be on Sesame Street. So I found a way to create that in my life. I've created my own kind of Sesame Street experience, incorporating music and education with children. But when I first entered education, it was because I was making a radical career shift. And so I came into education having had a corporate experience and sales management, having a business mindset, and then coming to education where back in the day, teachers didn't have performance evaluations. And I was just like, wait, what? Like, if you're in a corporate setting, you have to set goals, you have to check in with your manager. So I'm happy that that has changed very much so. At least I can speak for Massachusetts, and that you have to have goals and your supervisor checks in with you and then you revamp them or whatever. What hasn't changed a lot for me is, unfortunately, Black and brown students are still have an access gap or a resource gap, an opportunity gap, because I don't want to call it an achievement gap, because they're very bright and intelligent, but they're not able to access certain resources, or they're just not achieving at their level of ability, I think. So I'm so Frustrated, and enough so that I'm going to spend the rest of my life working on literacy goal and incorporating music and literacy, because my goal in the beginning, when I had to get certified after working as your after school academic liaison, and it was called kindergarten enrichment program. Twice a week I had the kindergartners and METCO students
Mhm.
work on whatever I thought was important, and it was a lot of literacy and it was kind of social emotional stuff. But now, even as a certified literacy specialist, working as a METCO counselor / engagement specialist for the last 20 something years, in a different community than I was in with you, the numbers are still so bad in
Mm.
terms of reading and math. And I'm like, okay, this is now 35 years or so that I've been looking at this. And so that hasn't changed, but what it has changed is some of the expectations for teachers in terms of setting goals, but still the cultural competency is not there. I'm still in a suburban community, majority white staff, and I don't see the push for, and especially we don't want to talk about what's happening in our country right now where they're trying to stop us from saying certain words. But racism is still real. Institutional racism is still real. Microaggressions still happen to Black and brown and other students, all kids of color, but I'm directly connected to the African American and Latina students, which is my target population as the METCO engagement specialist where I am now. But it's just, we try to pretend like it's not an issue, and it is. It is still an issue that Black and brown kids are not treated equitably, and often the same expectations are not there and the same resources are not given to them. So that was a long answer, but
No, it's okay. It's so, and it makes me think on my end because where I work in the heart of Roxbury, and
mm,
all my students are Black and brown
yeah,
students. And
okay.
it's always an interesting experience. I mean, at first it was kind of interesting because I'm coming from the world of the METCO. Obviously, I did college and it was more integrated and whatnot, and
Mhm,
many different faces. But kindergarten through 12th grade was my life, and sometimes I tell that to my students and other coworkers. Oh, you did METCO and whatnot, and I'm like, yeah. So seeing what my students are dealing with and going through, and I'm like, geez, I had it good, but I didn't have it good.
right,
In compared to what you're saying, like
right.
I was in a great school system in a
Mhm,
suburban
mhm,
town where all the things that you could dream of as a student you had in terms of
mm,
academics and athletics.
right.
But at the same time, it's like, was I really my best self,
Mhm,
especially academically with the resources that I had?
mhm,
Did the teachers necessarily care too much to make sure I was
mhm.
the best version of myself? That's a whole nother question that
Yeah,
you can ask. Um,
yeah.
but it's always interesting to think about and compare and contrast from where I am working now compared to
Mhm,
where I used to go to school, and what I saw and what I dealt with. Um, Even going out to hang out with you that time, I was always like, what would it be like if I was in this space, as a black man in this space trying to educate students from what I've dealt with and what I've learned and what I've seen over the years. So it was always something interesting to think about. And
mhm.
I'm happy you gave that perspective
Wait,
just
can I
now.
jump in and say something else? Because when you talk about
Absolutely.
compare and contrast, it's
Yeah.
interesting to me. So I worked in these suburban schools, but one of the things I would love doing as often as we could was a cultural exchange or community exchange. So there were years when we would take students from our school and we would shadow students at first we did it was over in Westy. It was one of the smaller urban science academy. That was the
Mm.
first connection because a good friend of mine I ran into at a lock salon. And I was like, what are you doing at your school? Oh, you know what? I would love for us to do this. And so that we did it. And then we did it a few years in a row, and we would shadow them in their school. They would come shadow us at our school. And then we would have a conversation about what that experience was like. We also did it with New Mission. We also did it with, and recently we did with Carver High School, which was, we went from
Mm.
our setting to a whiter setting, which was even deep, for those kids. They were like, oh my God, your school's so diverse. And our kids were like,
Wow.
no, it's not.
No, it's
But
not.
one of the biggest takeaways, which I loved, is that the kids who came over from even say Urban Science Academy, say if 25 kids came over, only maybe 2 would have switched because they
Mm.
saw the resources, but they didn't feel the love. Like they did not feel warm. Like when we would bring kids over to visit, say Newton South High School, I would have to tell the teachers, send out a blast email. We have visitors coming. Can y'all please smile? Can you please try to smile? Can you please try to look warm? Can you please? And the kids would peep it. And then when our kids went to visit the urban schools,
Yep.
they didn't like the fact that a lot of the bathrooms were locked. They didn't have free blocks at the other school, because we have a lot of free blocks where it's wasted time. If teachers are out, we don't have subs. It's a canceled class.
Could not happen at my school.
Exactly.
Could not.
In the city, the kids were like, wait, what?
Yeah,
Like, you
not a
have 2
chance.
free blocks? And they were saying, I'd rather just be home. Like, why? I wouldn't even want to be here. And so I just love for our kids to see and to feel the difference. Kind of like, yeah, you have more resources, but it doesn't make you feel good. Like, people are not smiling at you. People are not, sharing love with you. So it's not always about the money or the resources. It's about, how do I feel? Do I feel welcome? Do I feel invited? Which is one of the reasons I stay where I am. And I've been here for so long, even though my child, my daughter, who's this amazing educator who came out for just 1 year out of my school. And then she was like, I'm out. But she's like, why are you here? And it's like, because I need to be here. I need to be here as a bridge for these young people, because one adult can make all the difference in your life. One person looking at you saying, you can do it. You can accomplish things. Because that's what it took for me. I was a Metco student. So I went to school in Lexington. And if it wasn't for my 5th grade teacher, a white man, but he had a guitar and he was from California, which is why I think he was so cool. And he was like, he wasn't intimidated. He didn't act weird around the Black kids. And he was the first person, 5th grade, who said, Katani, you're really intelligent. Like, just sit down and do your work. Because I was class clown along with another friend of mine. And he was just like, no, you got to just sit down. And so I was like, oh my goodness, he thinks I'm smart? Really? You think I'm smart? And so I'm like, wow. So that energy is this, as you say, I inspired you. It was Mr. Josiahson who inspired me to know that one adult can make such an impact on a young person's life. So that's why I started in elementary. And elementary teachers don't get them as much glory as they deserve, because that's the hardest job. I don't care what you say. Elementary, and I tell high school teachers this all the time. It's like, y'all don't even know. You do not know.
Not a clue. Not a clue.
It's so hard. And they get so little credit and so little love and so little access to like privacy. You can't even make a phone call hardly at an elementary school. It's like, you got to hide in some corner. Like, I mean, can't take a bathroom break because the kids are like, eh. So trust me, I know, having K to 12, if I ever get famous, I've always said that if I ever get famous, I'm going to give so much love to elementary teachers, even as long as I worked at a high school, knowing how much harder it is working at an elementary school.
Dealing with elementary students is definitely tough. I teach K1 through 8th myself, so I can understand it all with everything that you're bringing up and talking about. But I want to touch a little bit more about Metco.
Yes.
And the experience, you just said you were a former Metco student. I'm a former Metco student. And then now you're still working in a capacity dealing with Metco students. Yeah. And every time I talk to my students in the city about, I did Metco. Oh, you went to school with the rich people and out with the white rich people. And, that's just the definition they have in their head. Out in the suburbs with the rich people, that's where you went to school. And obviously they see that. While I have how the best way these kids describe it. Oh, we could tell you're from the city, Coach Mike, but at the same time, oh yeah, you sound like you did Metco, and which is always funny to me. Yeah. But I want to ask you, maybe not necessarily to clear up the misconceptions of Metco, but like maybe talk about your experience to understand if someone watching this were to listen, someone listening and watching, they would want to understand what Metco is really all about, the pros, the cons, anything like that. How would you describe it?
Well, first of all, I have to start backwards and tell you that Metco is much different than you remember it. You may not be aware.
Interesting.
Please
tell me more. Tell me more.
I'll start the beginning. 1966. Well, Metco began officially as a pilot, a test program to see if it was possible to take, because now 66, it was before all the heated forced busing of the 70s, the early 70s. But, Ruth Batson and other involved parents, including my dad, they said, let's just let's try and get some spaces in some of these suburban schools and send these kids voluntarily on a bus. So the first group was like 220 kids went out to the suburbs to 7 communities. I think Lexington and Newton were some of them. I don't think Weston was on board yet. I might be wrong, but I don't think so, which is where you and I met. But so Newton was one of the original 7 communities that created Metco. Now, Metco started primarily with Black students. It was taking Black students to voluntarily desegregate these suburban communities. Desegregation. All right. Not necessarily integration. We're trying to desegregate it to make it so it's not so separate white and Black.
Yep.
So it has evolved over the years. And then, Latina students were added, and then Asian students were added. And so then it started shifting, and, there are more Latinos in our country now than African Americans. So the numbers, don't really still represent it. Primarily, it's mostly African American, Latino, not as many Asian students. And the Asian students, most people don't know. I'll talk from my community. Most people don't even know they're Metco students because they don't tend to ride the bus. Yeah. They get driven to school. They might live in West Roxbury. They might live right near where we are. So there's that part. And now there's a lottery system. And because of the politics of our country, you cannot designate that it can only be students of color. Oh, there are white students who are now in Metco.
Yeah, I remember that when I was in there.
Yeah. Which goes against the original charter, which was desegregation. So why do you need to bring white students to desegregate a white community? So you can't even really use the terminology anymore. It's a program to give access to a different community. So, there are people who try to push back on that, but now legally you can't necessarily push back on that. Now there's like a lottery system, and so it's really challenging now, and the money's been tight. So transportation costs go up, but they don't get more money from the state. So then you have to look at cutting back on staff or cutting back on resources. So it has changed a lot since I was in it, when I don't think there was anybody but Black kids on that Metco bus going out to Lexington. In your class, there were some Latino students throughout those years. Now there are Asian students and even some white students.
Yeah, I definitely don't remember riding that bus with any white students. No. It was definitely mainly Black, Black, Latino, and definitely a few Asians sprinkled in, but mainly Black and Latino. Yep. And, I always took away from the experience. I can go down a long list of, what did I like about Metco? What did I didn't like? What did I not like about Metco? But I always tell people, if there's one thing Metco did, it put me in a place where I knew how to integrate myself in various conversations, various environments and communities. So when I talk to my students, and one thing I try to explain to them, the best way they can understand is in terms of when you communicate with people, time and place, and how you talk and communicate. I don't want you to necessarily completely code switch and change who you are completely, but you need to understand, if you're going to talking to my 8th grade students who are going to, interview to try to get into high school somewhere, you got to understand who you're speaking to and want to present yourself the best way possible. Right. Not how you're talking to your boys at recess or your girls, in the lunchroom or whatnot. It's just little things like that where I would say Metco taught me. So I try to instill that in my students now. And hopefully they carry that with them as they move forward in life, high school, college, and whatever else comes next. But go ahead. I see.
I want to go back because I didn't really answer the pros and cons. So
go ahead. Yeah.
Some of the pros and cons. So looking back and having put my 3 children through Metco, I had to decide, do I really want to do this to them? But that's one of the reasons I went into education, because I said, I'm not going to just put them in there without me being in the buildings with them. So if you notice, my kids were also where I was. And then when I moved to Newton, the kids moved with me.
Took them with you.
Yeah, I took them with me because I wanted to make sure I had access to what was happening and understood the whole, milieu of what was going on. So the pros were, I was in the first class in Lexington to go from 1st grade through 12th grade and graduate as a Metco student. It was hard because they didn't know what to do with us. So the cons were, we got, there were stereotypes about us. I remember in 2nd grade, something was stolen. They rounded up all the Metco kids and assumed we took it. We were like, what just happened? So things like that. Going up through high school, one of the pros was, you're just around kids who are going to college. That's just what's happening. I'm first generation. My parents didn't graduate from college. Even my older siblings hadn't graduated from college, and I'm years behind them. So I was just around a lot of people that were like, oh, college is what's next. So I'm like, oh, okay. So if they're doing it, I guess I need to be thinking about that. There was a Black woman 2 years ahead of me who was talking about this school called Brown and Duke. And I was like, I had never really heard about those schools because college was not a conversation I was having in my house.
Yep.
My siblings had moved out. It was just me and my mom who hadn't gone to college. So I was like, Brown, wow, that sounds interesting. Oh, Duke, I don't know. That's kind of far. I looked him up. And then I was like, okay, Rhode Island. So then there was a Brown info session and I went. And I did not know it was Ivy League. I mean, I didn't know what Ivy League was. And I tell people that it was just the grace of God that this young woman was 2 years ahead of me because she thought it was a good idea. And I admired her. I was like, I want to go wherever she wants to go. So that is how I ended up applying, even though my guidance counselor said, you won't get in. And I was like, wait, what? I'm varsity basketball National Honor Society class vice president. Like, dang,
Tell him.
can
Tell
you
him.
give some love? He was like, you won't get in. But I think the athletic mentality I had told me, really, okay, eat my dust. I'm going to go. I applied early and got in early. So that was a pro in that you are surrounded by people who are already thinking and are moving and shaking. And, but then another con is sometimes you get treated differently. The social emotional stuff is not there. And my oldest daughter's PhD has to deal with what is it like to be a young Black girl going through a system like this. And there's an emotional toll. And I still see that happening 30 something years later. The boys get embraced, especially if they play sports.
Yep.
Or girls are playing sports now, which is helping. But typically, girls can be, very cliquish and, they don't get invited to the white girls' parties or maybe they don't even want to go.
Yep.
But the boys get invited because they're on the same football team or the same basketball team. I see a lot more of the boys.
You're bringing back so many memories to me right now.
Yes, I see so much more of the boys getting easily integrated in, whereas you don't see the girls getting easily integrated in. You don't see the women getting easily integrated in. I have issue now with even my district. There's not been a Black woman in leadership at either high school since the school started in 1859. So it's just like, what's that about? Like, what is this disdain we have as a country for Black women, Black girls who tend to take on a lot of the responsibilities? So I'm so proud of my daughter for doing the research that shows there's a serious emotional toll on Black girls and Black boys, but the Black boys tend to get embraced more because they play sports or they're on this, that, or other. So that was another long answer to say, yeah, there are pros, but there are some cons. So I tell parents, if you put your kids in here, please try to keep them connected in the community somehow. We had a pretty strong church experience, church community. Also, the youngest was in the Boys and Girls Club. The oldest one ran track. I can't remember what my middle one also like track and did science related stuff in the community. So we made sure there was still a community connection. Otherwise, you can feel like you're a person without a country because you go out there and you don't belong there. Sometimes you get treated like you don't belong, and then you come back and you get people teasing you like, oh, Oreo, or you sound white, or you sound whatever. Because I speak a certain way doesn't make me white. It just means I can code switch. And if you don't remember to code switch all the time, and nor should you have to, because you still are unapologetically Black.
Yeah.
We shouldn't buy into this. Like, if you don't speak this way, you're not really Black. But anyway.
You preach it to the choir right now.
Mm-hmm.
Everything you're saying, I completely hear and understand. I still teaching sometimes from the student or staff members who are born in the city, went to school in the city, but made their way back to teaching school. And I'm born in the city, went to Metco. I'm like, oh, we could tell you did Metco, and I'm like, right. I've been hearing this my whole life.
Yeah.
So it's nothing new to me. But here's what I really wanted to ask you as you were talking and saying so many things. Something else that came up to my thoughts about the Metco experience, Black history, and how it's presented or how it's taught or lack thereof in Metco schools. I tell people to this day, it's one thing that I always can say without a doubt. I promise you, I did not know what Juneteenth was till I left my high school. I left Metco.
It wasn't a thing then. Nobody knew really. It wasn't.
But like things around Juneteenth or, what went into that time period and stuff like that, I didn't really have the knowledge that many of my friends have who went to other places, who didn't go to Metco school. Right. And I use that Juneteenth example of just one of the many things that that information and knowledge didn't come to me till I left Metco and had to go seek out other places, or it was presented to me and I finally learned about it. But just the lack of knowledge and information really provided to not just the Black students, but all students in general. Because I remember in history class when I was in school, did we really touch on? And you talk about Martin Luther King, okay, Malcolm X, all right,
Rosa
on to the
Parks.
on to the next unit, and
Mhm.
that's it.
Yeah,
And you're
yeah.
limited to just a little bit when there's a vast amount of information out there about Black history and
Mhm.
what Black people have done and meant to this country over the years. What are
Right.
your thoughts on that, if
I
I can ask?
No, definitely. You can ask me anything you want. I have several, but I also want to push back and ask you. You work in an urban school.
Yes.
Do you all take a field trip at all downtown to see like the African Meeting House, to see the 54th Regiment um, monument, to look at the Embrace statue and the names of the civil rights activists at the base?
To my knowledge, no. I don't think that's what
Okay.
the middle school teachers
Yeah.
have done or set up anything like that. I know within the school, we
Right.
try to make sure, not only during Black History Month, but Black history is something that's known and talked about year
Mhm.
round. And then we obviously take it to another level to celebrate
Yes.
during Black History Month. But in
Right.
terms of field trips, I don't think anything like that has been set up within my school.
Okay. I only asked you that because here I am, I'm north of 60, proud to say it. And I didn't find out how impactful and how important Boston was to the abolitionist movement. Like Frederick Douglass came up here and spoke. Like there's so many things there were abolitionists, William Lloyd Garrison, all that stuff, the African Meeting House. I didn't find out about that until much later. So even as a medical student in Lexington, I definitely didn't find out. And then even just living in Boston, they don't publicize it as much. I've heard people from other states talk about how they love to come to Boston because it has such a heritage, a history, and anti-slavery movements. I'm like, what? So, huh? Like I've lived here my whole life except for when I went to college. Like, what is
Yep.
going on? So I'd say that. Next, no, we don't do a good enough job about talking about Black history, which is American history. So what
Yes.
we do at my school, though, Black History Month, we don't feel like it should be the burden of the Black students to have to pump it up, but it tends to have, unfortunately, it tends to be that way.
That
But
was us. Yep.
we do a Black Culture Day every year, and we do it in March. We just
Mhm.
had ours last Thursday. And as a part of the introduction, the co-presidents of Black Student Union say, and we celebrate annually in March because Black history is American history, and we can celebrate it every month of the year. So we like one year probably started by accident because we were like, you know what? February vacation, we need a couple weeks to make sure we got everybody tight. And so
Yep.
once we started doing it in March, I was like, no, we're going to do it in March every year because we can claim whatever month we want to claim. And we can
True.
talk about Black
True.
history all the time. Now, another thing is kids talk about white, Black. They don't really hear much other than, enslavement, slavery and whatever else. But now, last year, this year, actually, for the first time, there's an AP, Advanced Placement African American History course. Did you know
Never
that? That's
existed.
brand new. It's brand new. So that just released nationwide this year. Now, there are some states, of course, Texas and Florida, that are trying to restrict which high schools can even teach it. And even Georgia tried to put a ban on it before it even started.
Mm.
So it's just so interesting, the climate we find ourselves in, that people are trying to suppress, history, suppress the accomplishments of African Americans. And so the AP AFM Studies course starts back in Africa. You hear about Mansa Musa, the richest man ever, and you hear about the kings and queens, and you bring it all the way up through the civil rights movement. But that's only a select group of kids who take that course.
Yep.
But it is available. You have access to it. I'm trying to encourage all my medical students who can take it to take it. We take juniors and seniors, but so there is that, but it's still limited. It's
It's
not a
not what it needs to
priority.
be.
But during COVID, and Newton, when George Floyd was murdered, the English department, now we were online at the point in the fall, but they said we're only going to teach books by authors of color. They took
Okay.
out, they're like, we're no longer going to have this canon, which is like the standard that everybody needs. It's only books written by dead white men. We're going to have some modern literature with African Americans and, men, women, Latinos, Asians. And it has transformed the department because nobody went back to only teaching white men. So now, I can name, Maya Angelou is a regular, Zora Neale Hurston, other people, Langston Hughes is talked about. And I'm happy about that. And the white students need to hear it too. It's not just for Black
Absolutely.
people, it's for
Absolutely.
everybody.
Like you
Yes.
said, Black history is American history. And,
Right.
I'm happy to hear that, especially in your case, it's transformed over time slightly. Still
Right.
not where it needs to be for
Mhm.
sure. But,
Mhm.
like many other things, it's slowly but surely changing. Because, something as simple as, yeah, when I was in school, when Black History Month came around, You black students are putting on the Black History Month assembly. It's only the black kids is going to be in it. It's the black kids got to set it up and plan it and this, that, and the third. And it was just like us performing for the auditorium full of white people. I remember I had to dress up as like James Brown or something, for the portion of the assembly and go talking about music history. So, you know, it's interesting how things were then and compared to how they are now and how they're slowly transforming over time. Now, I want to go back to how I kind of started the conversation, speaking about how you were inspiration to me in terms of how I'm an educator in with what I do today. And what I'm curious to know is what goes into your thought process in terms of how you interact with your students. How do you go about building relationships? Because, I was there one day and I saw how kids go, hey, Mrs. Sumner, hey, what's up? Come hang out. But Miss Sumner, like, they're talking to you, very conversational. And like, that's me. If you were to talk to my students, I'm there to say, Coach Mike, yo, what's up, Coach Mike? Let's talk about. And then when I think about how I do it, I'm like, this came from somewhere. Because, similar to you, education wasn't my path. It wasn't my initial goal. But now that I'm here and I'm blessed to be here, it's like the relationships I build with the students mean the world to me. And I see that you kind of have that as well. And you've had that for years and years now. But what goes into that, process and mindset for you?
Okay, so I'm gonna start by saying I'm so proud of you and I'm so happy you went into education, because although it wasn't your path, it was your call. It was your call. I think education is a calling. However you want to term it, education is ministry. Education is a calling. And you have a gift that you are relational. And unfortunately, many, many teachers are not relational. But guess what? Education starts with the relationship.
Yes.
Starts with a relationship, because as you will, even if kids can't articulate it, the reality is, if I don't care what you know until I know that you care. Like, you cannot feed into my spirit whatever's in your head that you want to put all this knowledge in me if I don't think you care about me as a human. So you being a black male is so powerful. There are very few black men. I just came from a conference in California called Dream Deferred, which talks about education for black students as well as HBCUs. And it's like, there's so few black men in education. Like, the numbers are like not great. And representation is huge. So if you are in a place that people can see themselves in you, now what you might have also noticed that I can connect with the white students too, because I'm relational. So it wasn't just black and brown students who came and talked to me. So in my mentality, because I know what it meant for me, you have to see people. Like, don't just look at them, but you got to see them. I try to remember names as best I can. I try to call students by their name, by their chosen name, by whatever it is, because it's important that people feel seen and not just like, oh, you're just shuffling me through, this place. I try to get to know these students, and I have created safe spaces. I've been blessed that I had a tiny office in the beginning. Now I have a great big office, and outside of my office is an area called the Commons, which is where a lot of black and brown and white kids, like Black allies, Asian students, it's just a comfortable place to be as a person of color, and you can just chill. And so now they attract a lot of people there. And I'm just happy that I have that space, and I have my office, and I try to make it comfortable. We have couches. I have music that I'm playing during lunch often. So it's just kind of like meeting students where they are and letting them breathe and be themselves. And then, they just feel connected to you. So you just creating a safe space for your students is going to do them a world of good. And just continue to be excellent, demonstrate by how you live. Young people don't respond to what you tell them to do. They respond to what they see you doing.
Yes.
So if they don't see you being kind to people, they're not going to be kind to people. Like, we can't tell them, don't cuss. If you cuss it, it's kind of like, we have to demonstrate how we want them to be, and I try to extend kindness. I try to extend empathy. I want them to feel seen and heard. And it's a lot, but we have more black staff now. I personally recruited some. And then we have affinity groups so that, we can recruit more, so we can keep each other there and hold each other up. I have certain black staff members that I make sure I see somebody every day. Like, I got to see a black person. If I got to walk across the other side of school, like, I can't just be in this space as the only black adult that I see over the course of a day. So I'm very intentional about feeding my soul and not depleting myself. So I applaud you. I think I try to encourage you too. I'm always young men, like, please, we need you in education, especially when I see young people that work well with young people, because it's a call. Everybody can't handle
Yeah.
teens in elementary either. So, and I think you have to have a love for it. If you don't love people, if you don't love young people, like, please don't do this. I see people doing this career that it's like, are you sure you should be here? Because you don't seem
Very
to like
true.
young people. Like, don't go away because you're doing more harm. You're doing
Yeah.
too much harm to their spirit. Bettina Love, and if you haven't read this book, you should. We want to do more than survive.
Mm.
Bettina Love, and she didn't introduce it because she didn't create the term, but that's when I became more familiar with the term spirit murder. So what we do sometimes, the young people, is we spirit murder them. Like,
Mm.
you're not physically killing them, but you're killing their spirit. It's like, you can't expect a kid to want to do well in school if they don't feel good about being there. You don't know what's going on in their life. You don't know if they got enough food at home. You don't know what the relationship's like in their family. Like, you got to find out where they're at so they know you care about them. And then you can try to pull them into, working hard or being disciplined enough to do well in school. So, yeah.
The things you're saying is just reassuring to me that I'm on the right road and right path. If you're saying these things and I know that I'm trying to live them day in, day out, Monday through Friday when I interact with my students, I feel like I'm doing the right thing. It started as me just being the PE teacher and how I built the relationships,
Mhm.
through that class. And then, once I took on the role as the athletic director, that brings on a whole nother
You
element.
did. I knew you wanted to be that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yay.
yeah.
Sorry.
Appreciate
Okay.
it.
All right.
But I mean, connecting with the students who, yeah, they may be struggling in school, they don't want to be there, but you bring up sport, basketball, football, soccer. Now you can, unlock something in their minds to really build a whole different relationship with them. So,
Mhm.
on both ends of being the PE teacher side and athletic director side, I try to take a lot of what you just said and kind of
Mhm.
mesh it together with how I interact every day, how I communicate, how I build a relationship.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
mean, like you said, the major thing that you said to me is making sure that they feel seen and
Mhm.
they feel heard. They're still kids, they're still learning, they don't have everything figured out. They need that guidance and that direction. And you don't know what's going outside,
Mhm.
once they leave the school grounds, what they have going on in their world. But I always try to tell them, listen, Monday through Friday from 7 to 3 o'clock, when you inside these walls with me, you're gonna get what you need to get from me. And I'm gonna try to lead you down the best path I can.
Mhm.
And
Can I give you 3 more quick nuggets? One,
please, I want all the information.
one is one, I hope that you have a long enough career that you get to see the blessing of the students coming back to see you and to say,
Slowly,
so
slowly.
even the ones who were the most problematic. So just know that I think everybody wants attention. Everybody wants to be seen. So you will find a way to get that attention for either bad things or good things. So
Mhm.
I had to realize, like, I got in a lot of trouble in elementary. I almost got kicked out of school, but I think because my dad helped create Mexico, they didn't want to kick me out. It's just like, oh, she's terrible. And then they tested me and found out I had a high IQ, blah, blah, blah. Then they started me on this path by myself in these advanced classes, which wasn't fun either. But I realize now, looking back, and maybe even then, I really just wanted attention. Like, my mom was a single mom. She was trying to raise 4 kids. She didn't have time or energy, and she was dealing with her own issues emotionally. But when I had that one teacher, which is kind of like, he started affirming positive behavior. And I was like, oh, this is fun. So I really just want somebody to see me. So you want to see me do good stuff? Let me show you this. Oh, I can do this. I can do that. And then the more you want to affirm positive behavior, catch
Yeah.
kids doing something right and affirm that. So one, that's what I want to say. Okay. So you want to feed into the behavior, just
Yeah.
figure out what it is they need, like why they're getting attention, why are they doing it? And the other thing I want to share was learning the phrase of not looking at a child and going, what's wrong with you? Like, what is wrong with that kid? And I
Mhm.
got this from Oprah Winfrey, and Bruce Perry wrote a book that's called What Happened to You. So I've learned to look at students who are doing whatever they're doing and go, what happened to them? Like, to try to understand, how did they get that way? I don't think any kid really wants to get in trouble. Like, they don't want to
Mhm.
do things, but they've learned certain behaviors or they're trying to avoid
Yes.
certain things or
Yeah.
whatever. So I think if you can change that framework of not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you. You don't have to say it out loud, but in your head, what happened to you? So try to find out more about what's going on with their family, whatever. And then you to be that safe space where they can confide in you and then you can help work through some of those difficult situations. Because what I tell kids, I do a workshop on identity and different things. And I say, you know, whatever happened to you doesn't define what you become, but it can become your superpower. Like if you overcome childhood trauma, like I did, if you can overcome whatever you experience, don't be embarrassed by it. That gives you a superpower. That gives you a super ability to relate to other kids who have been through that, to relate to other people who've gone through that experience. Even then, like some of my children who had my former students who grew up the most traumatized childhoods, I encouraged them to become social workers or educators. And they didn't want, at the time, they were like, ain't no way I'm doing that. But now look at them now and masters in social work. And that's what they're doing. Because I said, you have an ability to listen. You have an ability to empathize because you've been through some mess in your life. So you can go back and help out. And the full circle about when you've been in it long enough. Last week was our Black Culture Day, and we had the first period of the day, we did non-traditional career paths. And it was so beautiful to have come back a firefighter who went to the Navy, who wasn't really ready to go to college yet, and an electrician who actually went to college, but then decided he wanted to do a trade. We have a makeup artist, photographer, and then we had a student who had been a car mechanic, but now he's an entrepreneur and does a hauling business of hauling cars across the country. And so all of them were like, listen to Miss Sumner. If she tells you to go to class, you should go to class or whatever. But just to see them come back and like say, I know I was such a knucklehead, but it's like, it doesn't matter. Look at you now. Like, yeah, I remembered you back then. And I'm glad I'm still in touch with you because you're the ones I want to come back because you got a story, because you knew high school was hard for you or challenging. You didn't really want to go to college, but you are all doing well now. It's not where you start, it's where you finish. That's a lot.
No, it's not enough. That's what it is. It's not enough. The nuggets that you share, the information, the knowledge that you have is exactly why I knew when I came up with this series of bringing people on to talk about, bringing women on to talk about various things. I couldn't wait for this conversation because I knew, you know, it was going to connect with what I got going on. But just to highlight you and the amazing things that you do, continue to do, have done. You know, words cannot express how grateful and thankful I am of having you a part of my life, you know, from years ago as a 5-year-old all the way through still today as a almost in my mid-30s, if I put my information out there like that.
Yes. Hey, this is what 62 looks like, baby.
And beautiful and still doing your thing. It's amazing to see. But I'm just so grateful and thankful for, you know, how you've impacted my life. And I know I can probably speak for many children, adults who are also very thankful for just the impact you've had in their lives, which is why you deserve all the flowers you could possibly get every day, all day, twice on Sunday, whatever the case may be.
It's an honor. Do you remember the chant I made y'all memorize? If my mind can conceive it and my heart can believe it, I know I can achieve it. Do you remember that? Did I make you get that?
That struck a chord somewhere up here when you just started saying that.
I used to make all the kids say that before they could leave my lunches. So
that struck a chord when you started saying that just now. Wow.
It's all good.
And we talking what, 1996?
Oh, no.
1996.
I was like, if my mind can conceive it and my heart can believe it, I know I can achieve it. That was from Jesse Jackson, I think. But I took it and made the kids learn it because I believe that. First, you have to have a vision and you got to believe it and work hard, and you can do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, you started that mindset for me at a young age, and it's carried me through all the way to today as I continue pushing through down this journey of in the world of education. But Mrs. Sumner, thank you so much for your time.
Yes, it's an
and
honor.
Just providing everything that you've provided. And again, you deserve all the acknowledgement, all the flowers, all the accolades, everything that's showered upon you. You know, I'm grateful and thankful.
Thank you for giving me my flowers while I'm still alive to smell it. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, for sure, for sure. This has been the final edition of Wonder Woman of the Week with the closer here, Mrs. Sumner. Thank you so much for tuning in and enjoying this ride throughout the course of March Women's History Month.
Yes.
Women deserve to be honored, celebrated, protected all the time, every single day. And that's something that myself, Double M, we will continue to strive to do. On behalf of Mrs. Sumner, I'm Mike Nice, Mr. Mike Nice. Have a good night. It's Double M to the moon.
Bye-bye.